Hello everyone. So we are continuing with the second part of the fifth module. In the previous session we discussed about free and damped vibration systems for a single degree of freedom systems, and we found out the equations of motion, equation for natural frequency, etc. During the using various methods. So in this session we will be discussing about the cases where there are dampers. Dampers means we will be diminishing the amplitude of the vibration. In the previous case there was only a spring and a mass, while in this case we'll be considering the situations where the amplitudes are diminished by the presence of some kind of an external agency or by something of internal manner. So the vibration energy is gradually reduced with the presence of a damper. That is the use of a damper. So the amplitude of vibration or the displacement of a particular member of the vibrating system will be reduced. So that is a ultimate aim of a damper. So basically we have different, we can model a damping by different methods. Of that we are going to consider two cases here. First one is Coulomb damping and second one is viscous damping. Usually damping takes place because of it may be because of friction, or it may be because of some kind of an internal reaction in the system. It's very difficult to model an internal damping, so we'll be modeling a damping using certain things which are easier for us to analyze. So of that, first one is Coulomb damping. So from the name itself it's kind of obvious that Coulomb friction is there, right? So Coulomb damping is something related to friction. So when the friction of two members cause a damping, then that gives rise to Coulomb damping. As you know, friction, the damping force is created by the friction in this case. So obviously it will be directing in the opposite direction as that of the applied force, right? So as you know, Coulomb's law of dry friction states that when two bodies are in contact, the force required to produce sliding is proportional to the normal force acting in the plane of contact. That is, the frictional force, even though the direction is different, the frictional force will be directly proportional to the normal force. The normal force is actually equal to the weight of the system. So we have already learned it in the previous semesters and all about friction. So the frictional force F is directly proportional to the normal reaction. The normal reaction is indeed equal to the mass of the object. Therefore, F is directly proportional to N, or F is directly proportional to W. So the constant of proportionality, F is equal to mu into N, where mu is called the coefficient of sliding or kinetic friction. Okay, so that is a basic principle. So N is actually the normal reaction, which is equal to the mass of the body, okay, which is given by mu into m into g. So that is a frictional force. So please understand that the frictional force will be directed in a way which is opposite to that of the applied force, or the direction of velocity. So we'll find out how the equation of motion will be in case of a sliding friction. So this figure shows a system where the mass is sliding on a surface. It has got a spring K with stiffness K, and the mass has value m. It is shown here that the displacement of the mass is plus x towards the right side. The direction of displacement is x. Positive direction is towards the right. Okay, so here we can analyze the system in two ways. So friction is provided by the surface contact. Okay, so in here, as you can see, in the right side there are two free body diagrams. Consider in the why there are two free body diagrams, I'll come to that later. The first case represents a case where see, the displacement is towards the right, plus x is shown towards the right in the first figure. So coming to the free body diagram, when the body is moving from left to right, so from the equilibrium position the body is moving towards the right. At that condition, what will be the free body diagram? That is shown in the first figure. So the mass is there, weight is acting in the downward direction, normal reaction is acting in the upward direction. Towards the right side there is x dot is actually actually velocity. So m is being pulled, the mass is being pulled towards the right, and there is a velocity in the right direction. So as a result, there is a spring force. Since the body is being displaced to the right side, there is a spring force directing towards the left side, having magnitude k into x, which you have seen in the previous session also. So this kx is actually the spring force, or the restoring force, which pulls back the mass. Okay, so these are the forces acting on the system. In addition to that, since there is friction between the two surfaces, there is a frictional force acting in the direction opposite to that of the velocity. So the velocity is directed towards the right side because the body is being pulled towards the right side from the equilibrium position. So the normal reaction is vertical, and the frictional force mu into n is directed at the point of contact in the opposite direction of the applied force. So since the applied force is in the right side, towards the right side, the frictional force will be towards the left side. So the direction of velocity will be always opposite to that of the frictional force. So that is the first free body diagram. So from that, let's try to develop the equation of motion. So as you can see, the acceleration, the displacement x is towards the right side, the velocity is towards the right side, also the spring force is towards the left side, as well as the frictional force is also towards the left side. But as a result of this displacement or this force, there will be an inertia force which is directed towards the left side. So considering the net force acting on the mass m, we can see that there is a spring force kx towards the left, a frictional force mu n towards the left, and since the acceleration or the displacement is towards the right side, the inertia force due to that displacement will be towards the left side. So all the three forces acting on this particular mass in the first case is towards the left side. So considering the equation of motion, so the first case we are saying is where the displacement is positive in towards the right side, and the acceleration is also positive, that is acceleration in the same direction of that of the displacement. So the equation of motion will be mx double dot plus kx plus mu n is equal to 0, because all these forces are towards the left side. All of these forces are directed in the same direction. Further, we can write it as mx double dot plus kx is equal to mu into n. In the next case, the second case is actually a case where you have to understand one thing. When the mass is moving towards the right side from the equilibrium position, the spring is being displaced, or the mass is being displaced towards the right. So the velocity is towards the right. That is the first case which we have seen, when the mass is moving from left side to right side. Now in the second free body diagram, the condition they have mentioned is that the mass which has been displaced to an extreme position is now coming back to the mean position. Okay, the mass which was previously displaced to the extreme position is coming back to the mean position. In that case, the velocity x dot shown in the second figure is directed towards the left. Okay, the velocity is directed towards the left because the mass is moving back to the mean position, but the displacement and the applied force is still towards the right, because it has moved towards the right from the mean position, not towards the left. So from the mean position, with an application of force, it has reached the extreme position. Now it is moving backward to the mean position. Even though the direction of velocity has changed, the displacement is still, the spring is still extended towards the right. Therefore, the spring force will be again acting to the left side. Kx will be towards the left side, because still the spring is extended, because the mass has not reached the equilibrium position. It is still in the extreme position. It's coming back to the equilibrium position. So the spring force will be tending to pull it backward. So Kx is towards the left side. Here in this case, one thing you have to notice is that normal reaction is also in the same direction, weight is also in the same direction. The thing which is varied here is the direction of velocity. In the previous case, the direction of velocity was towards the right, but here it is towards the left. So as a result, the frictional force will be directing towards the right, because the motion is towards the left, so the friction will be directed towards the right side. So considering that, in the second case, as we have shown, x is positive and x dot is negative. X dot is negative means the velocity is directed towards the left side. So the frictional force mu n is directed towards the right side. So two forces, kx is towards the left side, mu n is towards the right side. Now what about the inertia force? Since the displacement and the force is still to the right side, the inertia force mx double dot will also be towards the left side. Okay, we should not consider the direction of velocity to find out the direction of inertia force. We should be concerned about the direction of displacement. Even though the velocity is to the left side, the displacement is still towards the right side. The body has been displaced to the right side and it is going back. It's currently in a displaced position due to the applied force towards the right side. So the inertia force will be directed towards the left. Considering that mx double dot plus kx minus mu n will be equal to 0, because kx and the inertia force mx double dot are directed towards the left, and mu n being the frictional force is directed towards the right, because the velocity is directed towards the left. Okay, so that is all about the equation of motion regarding Coulomb friction. Coulomb friction, as you have to understand, it is caused by Coulomb damping is caused by the frictional force between the contact, and there are two cases where you can find out the direction of velocity varies during the course of oscillation. So one, in the first case, the body is being displaced from the mean position to the extreme position. At that condition we have analyzed case 1. In the second case, the body is coming back to the mean position from the extreme position. Still the spring is extended, still the mass is at a displacement towards the right side. Okay, so that is what you have to understand. The second kind of damping is most commonly used for modeling. It is called viscous damping. As you can see, some kind of viscosity of air or gas or whatever fluid may be used to arrest the amplitude of vibration. So in that case, you can model the system by considering a damper, a dashboard where you have a fluid filled and a piston acting on it, or a sliding motion between two plates, or whatever may be. So here we are going to consider a case. As we have done in the previous session, we need to understand certain things while you are analyzing viscous damping. So here we are going to analyze a system where there are two plates and a layer of fluid in between the two plates. The surface area of the plate as shown is A. The viscous fluid is at a thickness of h. Between the two layers there is a viscous fluid, and the height of that viscous fluid, the thickness of that viscous fluid is h. If so, we can find out, you know that Newton's law of viscosity suggests that, states that shear stress is directly proportional to rate of is directly proportional to shear strain, or the rate of change of velocity, or the velocity gradient. That is, shear stress is equal to mu into the velocity gradient du by dy. So that is shear stress. If you have to consider the force, F will be equal to the stress into area, that is tau into A. Okay, and substituting the values, you'll get mu into v by h into a, where v by h in this case is the velocity gradient. Okay, u actually represents velocity, and y is actually the variation of the value of u towards the vertical side. So in this case, that is actually v divided by h, where v is the velocity and h is the height of the viscous fluid. In that case, F can be written as c into v, where c is equal to mu a divided by h. Okay, and c is called the damping coefficient or damping constant. So in this case, we are analyzing the situation with by using Newton's law of viscosity, where it suggests that shear stress is directly proportional to shear strain, or shear stress is directly proportional to rate of change or the velocity gradient. F is equal to tau into a, and where by substituting the value of tau, you get mu into nu by h into a. So finally you get F is equal to c into v, where c is equal to mu into a divided by h, and c is termed as a damping constant or damping coefficient. F is the damping force, and v is the velocity. Okay, F is equal to c into v. Hereafter we are going to mention v as x dot, therefore it will be F is equal to c into x dot. So that is the damping force. Just you need to understand that damping force F is equal to c into v, where c is the damping coefficient and v is the velocity. So damping coefficient can be defined as force divided by velocity. So the force per unit velocity is what you call as a damping coefficient. Next, you need to find out the equation of motion for a system where you have a spring, a mass and a damper. So this figure as shown represents damped vibration systems. single degree of freedom, damped vibration system. If it was an undamped system, there would have been only a spring and a mass. Now there is a mass, a spring and a damper. C as is shown, this is how you represent damper. Damper is actually represented using a dashboard. It's kind of a piston cylinder arrangement. So what are the forces acting on the system? As you can see, M, due to the displacement x which is acting downward, you have got the velocity and the acceleration directing towards the down direction. And k is a spring constant, and due to this force, due to the application of this displacement, there is a spring force kx which is acting in the opposite direction, okay, towards the up. And in the third case, in case of the damper, as you have already learned in the previous slide, F is equal to C into V, or the damping force F is equal to damping constant C into velocity. So Cx is directed in the upward direction, okay. So here we have the spring force towards the up direction, and the damping force is also acting upward, and the applied forces towards the downward direction, and the inertia force corresponding to the applied force will be acting towards the upward direction. So all the three forces are directed in the same way towards the top. So the equation of motion will be mx double dot plus cx plus kx is equal to 0. Since all the forces are acting in the same direction, considering equilibrium, you will get mx double dot plus cx dot plus kx is equal to 0. So mx double dot the inertia force which is acting in the upward direction, kx is the spring force which is acting in the upward direction, and cx dot is the damping force which is also acting in the upward direction. So this is the equation of motion for a undamped free vibration, okay, free undamped vibration system, single degree of freedom. This is the equation of motion. Now how will you find out the solution for the system? This is a differential equation, and see, this is a homogeneous equation, so we can assume that x is equal to e raised to st is a solution for this particular equation. Mx double dot plus cx dot plus kx is equal to 0. As you can see, it is a homogeneous equation, so you need to find out the solution for this particular differential equation. So I'm assuming that x is equal to e raised to st will be a feasible solution. So x dot will be s e raised to st, and x double dot will be s square e raised to st. We can substitute the value of x dot and x double dot in the equation, and substituting the value, you will get the characteristic equation as ms square plus cs plus k is equal to 0. We are substituting for x dot and x double dot, and you will get a new equation, the roots of the equation. This is a quadratic equation, ms square plus cs plus k is equal to 0, the roots of which are by using minus b plus or minus root of b square minus 4ac. Substituting that condition, you can have two roots because it's a quadratic equation. The degree is 2 minus c, the second term, instead of minus c, plus or minus root of c square minus 4 into a is m and c is k divided by 2a 2m. So that is a root of the equation. So we can write it as, we can little bit change the rearrange it and write it as minus c by 2m plus or minus root of taking 2m to the inside the root, c by 2m the whole square minus 4mk. Okay, you are taking 2m inside the root, so the equation will be minus c by 2m plus or minus root of c by 2m the whole square minus km. Okay, so that is the root of the equation. Now, so the general solution, since there are two different roots, you can have the general solution as c1 e raised to s1t plus c2 e raised to s2t for a homogeneous equation, because the two roots are distinct. So there will be c1 e raised to s1t plus c2 e raised to s2t. As you have seen, s1 will be minus c by 2m plus root of c by 2m the whole square minus k by m, and s2 will be minus c by 2m minus root of c by 2m the whole square minus k by m. Okay, so this will be the solution for the differential equation mx square plus mx double dot plus cx dot plus kx is equal to 0. This is the normal way of solving. This is being a homogeneous equation can be solved in the normal way, and the solution will be of this form. Okay, now See, as we have seen, S1 2 or the roots of the equation can be seen as minus c by 2m plus or minus root of c by 2m the whole square minus k by m. So considering the value inside the root, that is the component inside the root is c by 2m the whole square minus k by m. Considering whether that value inside the root is positive or negative or 0, we have three different cases of solution. So there are three different cases depending upon the algebraic sign of that root term, root of c by 2m the whole square minus km. The first condition is case 1 where c by 2m the whole square is greater than k by m. So inside the root there will be a positive value. This condition is called overdamped system condition. Overdamped means the damping is more. As you can see, c, the first term is c by 2m, it is a damping coefficient, c is a damping coefficient, and in the right side it is a stiffness. So the damping is actually greater than the stiffness component, so therefore there will be more damping and it is called an overdamped system. So as you can see, since it is a positive system, there are real and distinct roots. The result of this condition will be oscillation motion. That is in case of non-oscillation motion, because since there is over damping there won't be any continuous oscillations. The motion will be arrested before that. So that is the first case. Second case is c by 2m the whole square less than k by m. In that case the damping is actually lesser than the stiffness, which means that the system is underdamped. In case of an underdamped system, there will be continuous oscillations. These oscillations will but gradually die out with respect to time. As the time exceeds, when the time reaches towards infinity, the amplitude reduces and it will reach the mean position. So in this case, as you can see, c by 2m is less than k by m, because and thus inside the root there will be a negative value. Therefore, the root s1 and s2 will be imaginary. Even though they are distinct, they will be imaginary because c by 2m is less than k by m. So inside the root there will be a negative value. But in the first case, that is not the condition. c by 2m the whole square minus k by m is actually a positive value. So you will have two real and distinct roots, s1 as well as s2. Okay, but in the second case, since it is a negative value, you will have two imaginary roots. Now is the last case. The last case is where c by 2m the whole square is equal to k by m. This condition where the two terms inside the square root are equal to each other is called critically damped system. Okay, this is kind of this is the most desirable case if you want to arrest a vibration, because in this case the system returns to its equilibrium position in the least possible time. Usually we use dampers to arrest the amplitude or arrest the vibration. In case of a critically damped system, the vibration gets arrested in the least possible time. So it will reach the equilibrium or the mean position in the smallest possible time. This is actually similar to the overdamped system, but the only difference is that it will reach the mean position in the least possible time. So it's actually a middle line between overdamped system and the underdamped system. So in case of an overdamped system, there won't be any oscillations. It will be a non-oscillatory motion. It will be a aperiodic motion. Okay, so there will be no oscillations at all, and it will die out with the passing of time. While in the second case, it's an underdamped system, there is no sufficient damping, which means that there will be oscillations. These oscillations will die out eventually by the passage of time. While in the third case, it's called the critically damped system. Critically damped system is actually the most desirable case, where we can have the damping we can bring the body to the equilibrium in the shortest possible time. This is actually critical damping is used in cases where we need to arrest the motion immediately, like in the recoil of gun. We have to bring back the gun to the position, to the mean position immediately after firing. So in that case you can use a critical damped system. But in most cases, the system will be underdamped. That is, there will be vibrations, there will be oscillations. So in only case where there are oscillations here is underdamped system. Both overdamped and critically damped systems are non-oscillatory systems. Okay. Next we are going to see in detail about the critical damping. As we have said, c by 2m the whole square is equal to k by m. This is called critical damping. Now you have to understand two terms here which will be useful in problems. First one is critical damping constant. As we have said, the case where c by 2m the whole square is equal to k by m, the value of damping constant such that c by 2m the whole square is equal to k by m is called critical damping constant, which is represented by Cc. Okay, C is actually damping constant or damping coefficient. Cc is critical damping coefficient, which means that at that particular value of damping constant, the term c by 2m the whole square will be equal to k by m. This is achieved at critical damping. Okay, now analyzing the equation, you can get c by 2m the whole square is equal to k by m. So as we have said, this condition is possible when c is equal to cc. So we can write cc is equal to 2m into root of k by m from that equation. Now you know that root of k by m is actually natural frequency omega n. So it becomes 2m omega n. There is one more way we can do. Mass m can be multiplied inside the root. So it becomes 2 into root of km. So there are two different equations which can, or three different equations by which you can represent critical damping constant. This is going to be useful when you are going to do problems. Okay. Next thing is damping ratio or damping factor. This is one of the most important terms when we are dealing with damped systems, damped free vibration. When we are dealing with damped free vibration, epsilon or damping ratio, which is also known as damping factor, is the most important characteristics. So this is actually defined as the ratio of damping constant to critical damping constant, that is C by Cc. The damping ratio or damping factor, which is represented by epsilon. In some cases, in some textbooks, it's represented as theta. So here we are taking the term epsilon is equal to C by Cc, where C is a damping constant and Cc is a critical damping constant. So these will be useful when you are doing the problem. Now, see, as we have seen, we are going to make a few inferences from what we have learned. As we have seen, C by 2m can be written as C by Cc into Cc by 2m. Okay, the term C by 2m can be written as C by Cc into Cc by 2m. We have learned that C by Cc is equal to epsilon, which is the damping ratio. Now, what about Cc by 2m? In order to find out Cc by 2m, you have got the equation that towards the right side we have Cc is equal to 2m omega n. So from there you can find out Cc by 2m is equal to omega n. So you can substitute that here and it will be epsilon into omega n. Okay, so C by 2m can be replaced by epsilon into omega n. Also we have k by m equal to omega n square. Now earlier we had written that the roots of the equation mx double dot plus cx dot plus kx is equal to minus c by 2m plus or minus root of c by 2m the whole square minus k by m. This equation you had already written, we have already discussed in the previous slide. Now substituting for c by 2m and k by m, we get s1 comma 2 is equal to minus epsilon plus or minus root of epsilon square minus 1 into omega n. Okay. So we are substituting the values for c by 2m and k by m from the formulas which you have learned in the previous slide. And now you get S12 is equal to minus epsilon plus or minus root of epsilon square minus 1 into omega n. Now we can define the three kinds of damping, that is overdamped, underdamped and critically damped system by using epsilon as a reference. Earlier we were using c by 2m whole square by minus k by m. That entity we used to define the three cases of overdamped, underdamped and critically damped system. But again, with the help of epsilon, with the help of damping ratio, now the root has become S12 equal to minus epsilon plus or minus root of epsilon square minus 1. So inside the root, the term is now epsilon square minus 1. So with that as a reference, we can again classify the system similar to that as overdamped, underdamped and critically damped system, where overdamped system is where epsilon is greater than 1. Epsilon is greater than 1 means inside the root the value will be positive. Underdamped system is epsilon less than 1, where you have negative value inside the root which have imaginary roots. In the third case again epsilon is equal to 1, so inside the root the value will be 0. So considering that condition, we can have three different equations or inferences. Now we are going to find out the solution for each case for underdamped, overdamped and critically damped system for the governing equation mx double dot plus cx dot plus kx is equal to 0. So the first case is where the system is overdamped. Overdamped means the damping is more than required, where epsilon is greater than 1. So the damping ratio is greater than 1, which means that root of epsilon square minus 1 is positive. Okay, since epsilon is greater than 1, root of epsilon square minus 1 will always be positive. So as we have seen, the roots s12 will be equal to minus epsilon plus or minus root of epsilon square minus 1 into omega n, as you have seen in the earlier case. So that is a normal case where the roots are real and distinct. Okay, since the value inside the root is positive, the roots are real and distinct, and the solution will be as shown: c1 e raised to minus epsilon plus root of epsilon square minus 1 into omega nt, and as shown the similar equation which we had obtained in the previous case. So this is actually a non-oscillatory motion. As you can see, the solution represents a non-oscillatory motion. The reason for the non-oscillatory motion is actually the overdamping. There is excessive damping here, and this oscillation dies out or diminishes exponentially with time. As you can see, there is an exponential component. As t tends to infinity, you can see that e raised to minus epsilon plus root of epsilon square minus 1 into omega n into t component is there. When t tends to infinity, e raised to infinity will become 0. Therefore, the amplitude x will become 0 at time t tends to infinity. One more thing you have to infer from that is that both the values are 0. Both the values are negative. S1 is also negative, S2 is also negative. As you can see from the equation, the value of S1 is also negative, S2 is also negative, which means that there is gradual diminishing of amplitude. Also, since this is an exponential system, e raised to component is there, the gradual decrease is actually exponential. So there is an exponential decrease in amplitude, and at t tends to infinity, the amplitude becomes 0. This is actually an aperiodic motion where there is no oscillation motion at all. So that is overdamped system where epsilon is greater than 1. Next is critically damped system. Critically damped system, to find out the solution for critically damped system, epsilon is equal to 1. So in the equation root of epsilon square minus 1 equal to 0, you can have the value root of epsilon square minus 1, you can have the value as 0. So considering the solution, S12 will become minus omega n alone, because epsilon is 1, values epsilon is 1, inside the root it becomes 0. So only omega n minus omega n is pinned. So this is equal root. These the roots are real and these roots are equal. For a real and equal roots, the solution will be x is equal to c1 plus c2t into e raised to minus omega nt. As is shown in the figure, this is also a non-periodic motion or a non-oscillatory motion, and this is also quite similar to the overdamped system. The only difference is that the system will be attaining equilibrium in the shortest possible time, and at most one time it will be, the mass will be oscillating to the mean position. Okay, so that is a case of critically damped system. Critically damped system is where epsilon is equal to 1. And the third system is called underdamped system, which is the most common system which we observe. In that case, root of epsilon square minus 1 is negative, because epsilon is less than 1. So the value inside the root will be imaginary, because root of negative value will be there and it will be imaginary root. So these roots are imaginary, and S1 and 2 can be written as minus epsilon plus or minus I into root of 1 minus epsilon square into omega n. So that will be the roots in this case. Okay, and since the roots are imaginary, the solution will be as shown: c1 e raised to, even though the roots are imaginary, there are two distinct roots, so the solution will be c1 e raised to s1t. S1 is equal to minus epsilon plus I into root of 1 minus epsilon square, plus s2 is equal to c2e into e raised to minus epsilon minus I into root of 1 minus epsilon square. Okay, now I'm taking taking e raised to minus epsilon omega t. That's common inside all the terms. So I'm taking e raised to minus epsilon omega t outside. Now the equation becomes e raised to minus epsilon omega t into c1 e raised to I root of 1 minus epsilon square into omega nt plus c2 e raised to minus I root of 1 minus epsilon square into omega nt. Now you know that e raised to I theta is actually cos theta plus I sin theta. So considering that, we have written in the third step. Now putting root of epsilon square into omega n as omega d and simplifying, you can substitute for root of 1 minus epsilon square into omega n as omega d, and simplifying the equation, you'll get the final solution as x is equal to c e raised to minus epsilon omega n t sine omega d plus phi. Okay, by simplification of the above equation, you can get you can arrive at this particular solution where c is a constant. Okay, so the solution for underdamped system is actually x is equal to c e raised to minus epsilon omega n t sine omega d plus phi. So this equation shows that the system is oscillatory in nature because there is a sine component. So it is oscillatory in nature, and omega d is the frequency of such vibrations. If it is an undamped vibration, the natural frequency is omega n, and in this case omega d is the frequency of damped vibration. So in case of an underdamped system, the natural frequency is actually the damped frequency, which is given by omega d, and it can be found out by the equation root of 1 minus epsilon square into omega n. So when you analyze the solution, you can find out that the system is oscillatory in nature. Okay, system is oscillatory in nature, and when t tends to 0, the oscillations die out. Okay, when t is actually t tends to infinity, at the time passes, the oscillations die out. But this is the only case where you have got oscillations. You can check the other two solutions also. There is no sine component, there is no, it's not a periodic function, but in this case the solution is a periodic function with sine component, so it is actually a oscillatory motion in case of underdamped system, which exponentially decreases. Okay, please do understand that here also the amplitude decreases exponentially. Now, so these are the three different cases of solutions for our governing equation mx double dot plus cx dot plus kx is equal to 0. We have got three different equation or different situations and different solutions for each of these cases. Underdamped system, overdamped system where there is excessive damping and there is no oscillatory motion. Critically damped system which has got the just the correct damping component and it comes to the mean position in the shortest possible time. And underdamped system where there is no sufficient damping and the oscillatory motion continues. Okay. Now graphically, if you are representing these three equations, you will get the system as shown. So there are four curves shown in this figure. The black one, undamped, as you can see, undamped one where epsilon is equal to 0. Epsilon is equal to 0 means there is no damping ratio, there is no damping at all. That is shown as a proper oscillation. Okay, undamped as shown in the figure, that is a normal vibration where the amplitude does not diminish. Since there is no damping, the amplitude is not diminishing, the vibration is continuing as such. Next is overdamped system. Overdamped system where epsilon is greater than 1. That is the dotted line in the top, it is shown, and you can see that it's not an oscillatory motion because the amplitude is not going below 0. It's in the positive quadrant. So even though the amplitude is starting and increasing, it's exponentially decreasing, as you can see. And when time extends, time is moving forward, the amplitude also dies out in case of overdamped system. As you can see, the overdamped system is epsilon greater than 1 and the amplitude dies out by when the time exceeds. Now the second case is underdamped system. Underdamped system, as I said, there is no sufficient damping. That is the only case where we have oscillations. That is also shown in dotted lines, where there are oscillations but there are slightly varied from the ones with undamped system. So as you can see, the amplitude of the oscillations gets decreasing in the case of a underdamped system. So the amplitude is getting decreased by gradually during the course of time. So that is actually underdamped system where epsilon is less than 1. And as you can see, it is a periodic function. Even though the amplitude is decreasing, that is a periodic function. The third one is critically damped system. The critically damped system is shown as dark line. As you can see, that is a vibration which dies out most sooner. See, you can see that it is actually similar to the overdamped case, but it's seen that it reaches the mean position in the shortest possible time. It immediately reaches to the mean position that is a case of critically damped condition where epsilon is equal to 1. Critical damping means the amplitude, it is also a periodic motion, it is not an oscillatory motion, and it reaches the mean position in the shortest possible time. So that is what this figure shows. Next is another important term which you have to learn. It is called logarithmic decrement. Logarithmic decrement is actually, as you have said, this is a case of an underdamped system where the oscillations die out gradually. So in case of an underdamped system, see, this is a figure of an underdamped system. As you can see, first amplitude is x1, then it becomes x2, then it becomes x3, and it goes on like that and diminishes. So logarithmic decrement actually gives an idea about the amplitudes of successive vibrations. So it is defined as a natural logarithm of ratio of any two successive amplitudes. Okay, if there are two amplitudes, the ratio of the two successive amplitudes, and if you take the natural logarithm, you'll get logarithmic decrement. So in figure there are two amplitudes x1 and x2. These are two successive amplitudes. If so, logarithmic decrement in that case can be defined as ln, natural logarithm x1 by x2, where x1 is the amplitude of the first wave and the second x2 is the amplitude of the successive wave. You can also see in the figure that even though there is a decrease in amplitude, if you are joining the top or the crests or the troughs, those lines also follow exponential decrease curve, which means that as we have seen in the solution, e raised to components are there, which means that there is exponential decrease in value of amplitude, that is shown in figure. Now as we have seen, delta is equal to ln x1 by x2. Generally speaking, logarithmic decrement can be represented or defined as delta is equal to ln xn by xn plus 1, where n is an oscillation and n plus 1 is a successive oscillation. So any two successive oscillations, if we take the ratio of any two successive oscillations, then delta can be defined as ln into xn by xn plus 1. In addition to that, there are other equations also for logarithmic decrement. All these equations will be useful when you are doing problems. Next equation is delta is equal to 2 pi epsilon by root of 1 minus epsilon square, where epsilon is the damping ratio. There is one more definition or one more equation for logarithmic decrement. That is a case where we are given n oscillations. If one amplitude of the first oscillation is given and the amplitude after 5 oscillations is given, in that case, if you need to find out the logarithmic decrement, the equation is 1 by m ln x1 by xm plus 1, where m is the number of cycles. So if you are supposed to find out, in that case, different problems will be asked in these cases where you can use all of these equations. So logarithmic decrement is actually the diminishing of the amplitude of vibration actually follows a logarithmic pattern. Even though the peak is exponential, it's the reduction in amplitude actually follows a logarithmic pattern, and this is called a logarithmic decrement, and this can be found out using the given formulas. So as of now, this is the basic ideas or the general concepts of damped vibration, which will have to look deep into. So these are the basic concepts and the theory parts. More and more problems will be there. We'll have to discuss a lot of problems in this this area. Before that, just go through these slides and just have an understanding about what is a damped vibration, how the conditions will be there, what are the solutions, and what are the different cases where the solution can be found out, and what is logarithmic decrement, conditions of critical damping, etc. So with that, we are concluding this session. We'll come with a new session hereafter.